don't do
Let
that.
me ask the question: how do you think that could be achieved?
I don't know. It takes like an insane level of self-awareness that people have to do on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, again, I keep using myself as an example because I consider myself a pretty progressive and liberal person. And I constantly find myself trying to like see whether I've put up, like whether I have these cognitive biases up that are keeping me from seeing it from someone like Eric Larry Elder's view, right? Like, and like that's hard work, right? Like it's a hard thing to do. Like, and even as I go through it, I'm like, nah, like I'm like, nah, but like, I don't know, maybe, right? That's, it's kind of my experience and natural selection. All these things have breed me to be this way. And I don't know.
I mean, and just real, and
So
just,
when
and
we
just,
come down
and just
to
real quick, and I want to get the answer from everybody on this. Okay, I know you mentioned Adam individually. Do you feel that there are any public influences, whether that be government, corporation, people in position of power due to money or any type of influence that can help with that other than just relying on the individual? Do you feel that any kind of organization can be conjured up to help individuals with that?
Before moving on,
Okay.
because I really want to touch something, because like when you mentioned the Larry Elder and with cancel culture and so forth, one of the aspects of cancel culture that is danger, that's another danger of it anyway, is that because cancel culture is so absolute, we cancel that which might actually have value as well. So, like, say for instance, a Larry Elder. I've heard him before. I'm very familiar with him, and he's said and done some things that to me are deplorable.
Sorry.
But the thing about it is this, though, is absolutely everything that he's saying incorrect.
No.
And I would say no. So this is the thing. This is where we have to be very, very careful, because it's I'm seeing it happening in religion as well. When you have a level of the conscious community that see the Bible that needs to be just completely canceled, thrown away. It was used for slavery. When the same community believes that I do too, that much of the Bible was stolen from our African ancestors. So this is the thing. It's like, okay, now which one is now a stolen diamond is still a diamond, but you're telling me that we need to throw this away now. So I'm saying that because it's like you have this, you want to cancel something out, but you want to now cancel that which actually has value. It's like before you cancel what you don't like, extract the value first.
Yeah, so it's almost like we can almost make the rule, right? Like if there's something that be having a conversation about, by definition, even no matter how much we don't like it, we shouldn't cancel it. But behaviors that hurt people should result in cancellation. And I think that's an easy, bright line, right? Like if you're hurting other people, let's say, abusing women or whatever it may be, like then let's have at it, cancel. But if you say something unpopular, then that shouldn't be a cancellation, because we have to assume that there's a chance, even if it seems unlikely, that there could be some merit to what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like, just like you said, like if somebody brings up this whole thing about the Bible or whatever, you don't want to cancel them, because what if they're right? What if it's something we need to consider? And we can't punish people for taking risks and saying things that are unpopular or controversial.
Yeah, and I brought up like when I was even mentioning that to Adam about the organization or any type of form of something that can help, because and I know, like you say, speaking, it sounds good like theoretically, but practically it can be instituted with what we're doing right now. This is a practical example of having a conversation that's throwing around ideas of how to determine what's really the guidelines. Right? And do we see this effort being made publicly by any type of influence, like out there to be like large scale, like no, this is not, and that's what I mean by it can actually happen. It can happen where you can start to get some clarity and get people together on certain things if a constructive effort was put forth in a way that where people can check in, like, we're doing all kind of other shit. You know what I'm saying? Like we can make an effort to institute this in so he can be agreed on. It can be instituted practically. You know, this is something that people are. We started out this conversation a while ago with choices. When Richard brought up about choices, you know, people are choosing not to do that. They're choosing not to make it and put it down in a practical way, because so it's only going to stay in someone's mind because people think that, oh, that's not real. Okay, it's not real today, but can it be real tomorrow?
Right,
Because
right.
we made a lot of shit that wasn't real yesterday real today. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it was an effort and a choice, a conscious choice made. Because why? It took priority. It took
Yep.
priority. And that's what I say. It can be real practical if the effort was there. You know what I'm saying? Like, but obviously the choices are not going that direction. You know, so it looks like it's just off in someone's mind, or like that can never be seen, that can never be perceived. You know what I'm saying? But it can, because if you want, you can make it happen.
Agreed.
I'm seeing this cancel culture in it's interesting. Like, is the degree of cancel culture, or the you know how broad it is now? Is it a product of an imbalance of individualism? Because the thing about it is that what makes it a challenge to cancel an individual is a collective. If there's a collective, if this individual is attached to a collective, it makes it more difficult to actually cancel that individual, and it also makes it easier to devalue the individual because you don't see them as a part of a collective. You know, I'm just thinking at it from a societal standpoint as a contributing factor. It's this insane push, because I really see it as a huge imbalance of individualism, because, of course, individuals make up the collective. But this huge thing on individual, is it now playing a part in this cancer of a cancel culture?
Damn.
Yeah.
It's just I'm looking at it. It's like, okay, you can easily, with this this individual society, you created a internet where everyone can now be connected, but you create a sense of individualism and this culture of individualism where you can just pick and grab, and there's no collective challenge to the canceling.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when you're more isolated as an individual, it's just easier, definitely, to do anything, and that's something that I've always looked at in particular with use the example like with black people, like, you know, other people of different nationalities or different ethnic backgrounds. Something happened in the U.S. or something, they got a whole nation of people that would rally behind them. Like they got ran like usually like a lot of examples like a nation stem like nah, that ain't finna go like that with this dude, or it ain't finna go like that with this woman. But like shit that happened to us a lot of times, like it's no real like backing, like because that's a whole nother conversation, because it's really like not a real nation. You know what I'm saying? It's not a real identity. So it's like, hey, you on your own, man. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to deal with this whole beast by yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like so, and that analogy and how it works with individualism, like that's another element of control too. You create an environment, a breeding ground of individualism and ego. So if I'm trying to control people, I want that environment rather than a more collective, unified environment where people are together, because it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to control and do what I do. So that's a part of the whole, plot I see. It's just this arrogant, egotistical, individualistic culture. And now the ramifications of that is throughout every kind of facet in society and what's going on. And we're particularly talking about like people getting canceled and shit like that. That can easily happen, like Charles said, with no merit. People can just come up and just say something and just railroad you out the picture because you kind of by yourself. You're kind of by yourself, and you're gonna have to beg and get on your knees basically in front of everybody and beg for them not to do it.
Cancel you without the collective, though. They need the collective. Kevin Hart wasn't canceled because the collective wasn't behind it. We weren't all behind it. You can't just cancel because you're an individual, right? Like I can go online right now and say, yo, like, Kevin Hart's a piece of people would be like, yeah, all right, we heard what you said, but I'm still going to that show though, right? Like, I mean, you need the part. I think that's the kind of somewhat balance when it comes to cancel culture is that collective, which is, in order for it to actually cancel someone out, you need to get a certain number of people behind you. You got to get like the force of cancel culture behind you.
Yeah,
And
but I think it's worth flagging though that like there's probably people who were more or rather less protected than others
for
who maybe were unfairly destroyed. And I almost think like
give an example, for example, like
well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, to be honest with you. But there's like, I'm sure if we went back through the record, and maybe we don't hear about them and because these people weren't famous enough, they didn't have enough clout, they didn't have enough pull, but maybe they were objectively in the right and went down. But I do think one thing that can inoculate that to a degree is having a platform like we have, right? I think it would be tough, for instance, for me personally to be unfairly canceled because of something I said. Can you guys still hear me? I think my AirPods are dropping off. Because I have the context of like you guys, right? Like we're part of this group that has these rules where we're trying to say controversial things or try to talk about tough things. It's unlikely as a result of this, right? That like pharmacy is going to get obliterated because of something controversial that I say, right? Because there was other people in the room. We all have like this consent. Everyone can more or less vouch for me, right? But without something like that, I probably could be. I'm just a small business owner, right? And maybe if I said something somebody didn't like, some of our customers could build up enough momentum to be like, you know what?
I don't think this group shields you from that, though.
I don't think it doesn't shield, but I do think it's better than being alone.
Well, that's part of the collective, right? Like you've got like some support behind you, so that would prevent you from being canceled, which is kind of my point, right? Like the more people that are collectively behind a particular message or the other side will prevent or
but there has to be the existence of the other side or the first side, I should say, right? Like if you don't have a public persona where someone could go back and look and see who you were or see a body of work from you that is in line with these topics, you know what I mean? So for instance, the people here locally, and you may not know this story, Adam, but I know for a fact that Steve and Your Highness will know the story. There was a business owner here who had several successful restaurants. Well, I don't know how successful they were. They may not have actually been, but several prominent restaurants. And, he made a statement that was, he did some things that were like objectively bad decisions and like of poor taste and like racially charged. And he was obliterated. Now, I don't have like a lot of sympathy for the guy, right? But I also don't know him. And because he didn't have a public persona of engaging in these kinds of topics, there was no, if he was a really thoughtful guy who was, again, which I doubt, but if he was a really thoughtful guy who just was down to talk about questionable stuff and take risks, we would never know that because there was no body of work to analyze.
Do you think what's the context of what he said though, right? Like, so like, yeah, we're pretty open with our conversations and stuff like that here. But again, this goes to like the line drawing. I guess it kind of depends on what it is exactly that he said or not, right? Like whether he had, a history of social justice work in the Black community or not. If he came out and said something crazy, he would have been like, yeah, nah, son. Like,
Your Highness, do you remember what he said? Do you remember like what exactly happened?
Yeah, I mean, he just said, I think you're talking about the dude, the Franklin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he put some tweets up. He was saying, like, I think he said, it was something like, damn, like, these dudes, like, he said, these niggas wearing shirts, like, they dress bad and big and all, but I accept their money. I don't like them, but I accept their money.
I remember it now.
Okay, so that's a pretty good example of something that, like, I don't care. He could have been the president of the NAACP, bro.
But I was just gonna say it was a couple of them. Honestly, it
I
was.
think the thing
it was
that
a
brought him
couple of them.
down was something to the effect of like
That didn't bring
something
him down.
against
He said, "I'll shoot him." Or something
No. I
like
think they might have found that later because they started digging to go cancel this
Okay.
dude. But I think
Okay.
That would have been like.
But
That's the
that
thing.
wasn't what they found. No one knew about that statement until other people came forward because the cancellation
Okay.
process had begun. Is my understanding.
So what was
What
like
started the
the triggering?
cancellation process
Yeah.
was an
Yeah.
anti-protester statement, something to the
Oh
effect of like,
yeah.
don't kick my shit down, or I don't remember what he said, but like I got my piece or something.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
like,
Like,
I'll shoot y'all ass, basically, like you're saying. Like,
yeah, which like again sounds terrible. Probably is terrible. It sounds like the guy's a piece of shit, but
he
a
framed it
black
in a way
person,
too.
could have said that about the exact same situation, and it would have been different, right? Because people have a right to protect their property.
But I
It wasn't.
think it was a little extra. I know he framed
One,
it.
I think
He framed it
even
with
if he
protected
was
property,
black,
but
he
he put
probably
a
would have
little
been
extra.
canceled too, right? Like I don't think that, you know, I think the response probably would have been. And in fact, I didn't even know that he wasn't black until you just said it just now. But I mean, if he was black, I think there still would have been a response. I understand your point, right? You do get like some additional levity once you've got like some kind of like, you know, track record of XYZ and people know that. But I do think that there's a limit to what that coverage provides, right? Like if you out here talking about shooting niggas and this is
Yeah,
like,
but we don't care about those
I don't
people.
care
But we don't
if you
want to
walked
protect
with
them
Malcolm
anyway.
or Martin Luther
Yeah, we
King,
don't
right? Like no one's
protect those
going to your
people
restaurant,
anyways.
right?
What we're talking about on the program right now though is like how do we protect the people who mean well
How about
from the mob
Yeah.
that's just reacting.
how about this? How about this? Let's reverse that situation, and let's just get to the real grimy. What if it was a black person, black owner, and it was like, and it was something like with white people come around doing stuff protest. They was like, they better not break my shit. I'm gonna shoot these crackers if they try to cover my shit.
Depends what they protest.
Just like that.
Well, here's the
saying?
thing, though.
Like,
Here's the thing, though. Maybe that's dependent on what they're protesting, right? And maybe that's why the response was what it was, because I don't know what they were happened to be I'm assuming it was like a social justice.
Yeah, it was during the height of the
issue.
BLM.
But
yeah,
you mean if Proud Boys comes down the street
that
and they're
part
talking
right
about
there.
white power,
Right.
and I'm like, yeah,
Because you got to look at that from the historical standpoint. There's
right,
there's too much.
right,
There's
like,
entirely
for
too many
sure.
historical
I'm gonna grab my
instances to where
gun
it's like
and
too
possibly
many.
shoot you,
Yeah,
right?
there's entirely too many historical instances to where it's like if because we literally had to do that coming up in America throughout the ages of like, okay, I have to load up, get ready because I know these white sheep coming.
I would be like, you would be dumb to not, right? Like you're risking yourself if you don't.
Right. And so it puts this person in the position of like I say but it kind of speaks to what Charles is saying. It's because of the historical, because of what the historical reputation of the person. They said something that's kind of out of whack, but you realize that it's some things that you have to take a look into historically with the person to see if there's some value to what they're saying. Or if it's a thing of where it's like, wait a minute, you've done all this work for the black community. I'm talking about like as a Caucasian that has a business and all of a sudden he goes sideways. Okay, is it a thing of like, okay, do we just cancel him? I'm like, wait, what happened? Because it's like if they were a true benefit to the black community, it's like, okay, what went wrong? Now, it's at that point because of the history. It's a thing of let's look into it before just canceling. Now, if it's a thing of where it's like, oh, that's just your true heart. All right, now we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah,
okay,
but was he? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Was he? I don't think. Well, I don't know, right? I don't know this situation, but like, I don't think I would cancel someone in and of itself just because they owned a business and they were like, hey, like, there's been a lot of riots in my city. I want to make sure my business doesn't get torn to shit. This is my livelihood. I'm going to be here with a gun to protect it. I'm like, all right, I kind of understand that, right? Like,
but
black, white.
He did frame it a little more. It wasn't just
that. It was a little more aggressive than that.
Okay, but my point is like
black shit. Like,
I know, but that's my point, right? I'm like, if someone did that and they were like, I'm like, all right, I get it. Whether they're protesting social justice issues or whatever the case is, Like, this is my livelihood. This is how I feed my kids, man. Like, I want to make sure that this is safe. I don't inherently beef. I'm not like, oh, you canceled, I'm not going to go in on them because of that, because I'm like, all right, I get that. But it sounds like this was a lot more aggressive than that. And then,
well, it was, and he was actually this bad person too. So like there were people that came out after that who were like, oh yeah, I know how this dude rolls. Here's the receipts on other shit that was way worse. And so there was a body of work that like really justified it, and like literally no one's sad for this dude.
Yeah,
in this city.
Yeah, I think the Sam Harris one is like a good comparison.
Right, the Sam Harris is the one that's worth talking about.
Who I also do think is like guilty of his own form of like tribalism, right? Like, I don't think that he thinks so. I think he like kind of categorizes himself as just like this purely logical, rational being, and kind of believes that like everybody else is like everyone else is like you. I don't want to say lower forms, but you all are like, your views are tinged by your cognitive biases, but everything I'm saying is just completely logical and reasoning, which by definition is his own little form of tribalism, right?
I mean, he doesn't have Lowry or these other people that he loves to quote actually on the show. So like, there's obviously limitations to how much he cares about these issues, but still, you don't want to see the guy get canceled off of something like saying something that's
like sometimes there's going to be difficult conversations and they need to be had, and I think there needs to be some level of levity with having those conversations, but there are a lot of considerations that go in to how much levity is actually given to people, and I think that comes from their background, their history, what they're saying, what their intentions are behind like having the conversation. Like, all these things play into it, and it's just a hard thing on a day-to-day basis when interacting with people to gauge all of these different factors and determining whether is this a fruitful conversation or is this guy just kind of a motherfucker?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.